Okay, welcome this evening to our school board study session on the 24th at 6 o'clock. With tonight's purpose and agenda, Dr. Stallo.
Thank you very much. Good evening, all. The purpose of study sessions is for us to have the opportunity to share information, to build trust, and to work together to ensure effective decision-making during regular board meetings. We have a very robust agenda this evening. Tonight, Peter Leatherman will share with us the results of our community survey, and we'll also have additional stakeholder information shared by Director of Technology, Marcus Milazzo, from students and staff regarding their use of technology throughout the year. We will be seeking direction from the board this evening in terms of continued planning for technology levy and what that looks like. Additionally, Executive Director of Business Services, Julie Sink, will provide the final preliminary budget for 2021-2022 and also update us on some of the federal funds. Executive Director of Human Resources, Jim Quorum, will provide an overview of district priority work in which he and his team have been engaged. I'll share a draft of our district operational plan and priority work for 2021-22. And we'll continue to review policies and then end with a closed session regarding the superintendent evaluation. So it is indeed a robust agenda with lots of important work. So thank you all for being here this evening.
Okay. And I think next up will be, Peter Leatherman with the survey. Yeah, come on up. We're good, right? Yeah. All right.
Good evening, Peter. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Good evening. Pleasure to be here with you in person. I appreciate that. Just to review what we undertook for the district, we'll get right to it since you have a very busy agenda. We spoke with 400 randomly selected residents across the school district. That 400 sample is to projectable within plus or minus 5% in 95 out of 100 cases. Now, we also did a balloon sample. So within that 400, we approximately a third indicate that they had children attending the school district. And so about 130, so we called an additional 170, put those together, so we had a statistically large enough cell size to look at parents, okay? For the purpose of this, when I'm going to focus on the overall, looking back at history, but we'll look at some specific issues with parents, the pandemic, awareness of programming, that sort of thing. The parent sample at 300 is plus or minus 5.5%. The interviews were conducted between April 27th and May 13th. Average interview time was 14 minutes. Non-response rate was 5.5%. And if we start looking at the demographics, the first thing I always put up, everybody wants to know, is the makeup of the telephone service in the household. So now a flat majority of Prior Lake Savage School District residents are cell phone only, 51%. 9% are landline only. They still exist. They're my parents, actually. And then 40% have both landline and cell phone. Continuing on with the demographics, the first set of bars is the residential longevity in the school district. You can see you've had 23% that have been in the district for less than 5 years, with 27% in the district for over 20 years. The average comes in right at about 12 and a half years for the typical resident in the school district. Age, it's about 44 years is the cutoff. 49% are under 44 years old. You have 30% over the age of 55. 18% indicate that they have preschool children. 33% indicate that they have a child attending Prior Lake, and then 59% are empty nesters. And that is not to imply an age. That's simply a lack of presence of a child. So you could have an 18 to 34-year-old without a child. Continuing, the party breakdown, 38% indicated the Republican, 35% Democrat, 22% independent, 42% conservative, 31% moderate, 24% liberal. We ascertained the ethnicity. 79% indicated that they were white, 6% African American, 5% each Hispanic, Latino, or Asian Pacific Islander, and 3% Native American. And then when we do these sorts of funding requests, years ago, we used to ask income, and we determined long ago that income doesn't necessarily imply the folks' ability to be able to pay for something. And so we ask a four-part question now, asking people to think about their income versus their expenses, okay? And this has been very fluid over the last 15 months of surveying. To give you a basis, going back to the recession 10 years ago, got to be about 65% indicated they were financially stressed. When the pandemic started across the state, it was at about 30% financially stressed. And we wondered where we were going to go as we went through this. The highest it ever got was at the second shutdown right around Thanksgiving and in the holidays. And we got to 53% financially stressed. And in doing some research and asking folks, because it never got to that point, people were telling us, the income might have been impacted, but I have a heck of a lot less expenses. I'm not going on vacation. I'm not going to restaurants. I'm not going to concerts and all of those sorts of things. So it never reached the financial stress levels that we saw during the recession. Right now, the average, you're right at about the average, it's about 40% financially stressed. As things have started to open up all spring, people have started to feel better about their financial situation. And the last group of demographics then, 16% indicated they were renters. The self-assessed home value, now this is going to probably be a little bit higher because people are always more hopeful. And now you're hearing more and more stories about houses selling for a lot more than expected. It would be roughly at about $325,000. You have a majority that are college graduates, with 1 in 5 that are high school graduates or less. You can see the geographic breakdown, 57% Prior Lake, 32% Savage, 11% Townships, and then an equal split on the gender distribution. Before I go into the survey, any questions on methodology or demographics? All right, survey says, right at the top, this is what we've seen across the state and the metro area since schools started to open this past end of January, first part of February. Last fall, the concern was very much, the argument was whether schools should be open, how they should be open, and everything like that. And folks were concerned about the details. What has shifted over once the schools started opening up is the long-term impact on the quality of education in a school district. And you can see you have it there also. And what I'm looking at is the excellent rating. The 63% excellent back in 2019 was right at the top of the charts. You have a 9-point drop. Now, that's not as significant. There are some, Edina dropped 20 points, Wayzata dropped 20 points on the excellent. The key on all of these, though, is they haven't shifted to the unfavorable. They've just gone to the good category as the concern. You can also see what we're seeing, and this is going to continue throughout if you look over at the unsure. And these are primarily non-parents. They have been disconnected from school district and city government. When we do surveys for both, they have been focused for the last 15 months without children. You've had a pandemic, you've had racial inequity conflicts all summer, you had the presidential race, then you had a second surge, then you had the vaccine, and they have not been paying attention to really what's happening locally. And we're going to see a higher level of uncertainty than we've seen in the past. Meeting the learning needs of all. This has obviously dropped across in your district and across the state and the metro area. I mean, before you had 61% indicating all students' learning needs are being met. That's a stringent standard to say all. You're at 48%. The norm on that is down to 40%. When we follow up, and the follow-up is with the 39% that say most, only some, or very few. Is there a specific type of student whose learning needs you're worried about? You can see there's a clear theme there. It's average, below average, special need, low income, and underachievers. Kind of everything you've been hearing about the past 4 to 5 months and the concern with education and linking it back with achievement gaps. You can also see on this one, 13% indicate, I don't know, I have not been paying enough attention. Quality over time. 27% over the past 5 years, the quality of education is better. 7% say it's worse. For direction, get a sense of direction in the district, always look at the ratio. It's 4-to-1 positive to negative. So the feeling is still that you're going in the right direction. You can see the uncertainty trend from 8 to 26%. And a lot of that has to do with two factors, non-parents, but also you have 25% that have been in the district for less than 5 years. They don't have that baseline of information to do that comparison. Awareness of programs. On this one, this was 5 new questions just to ask if the community and the parents were aware. I put up the overall results, and then the yellow are the parents specifically. You can see there's 4 programs for the community as a whole that have majority awareness: the Spanish Immersion, Bridges, SAGE, and eSTEM. MinCaps, 37% of the community as a whole. Amongst parents, you have 3/4 on those ones that are more highly aware of the community as a whole. And then MinCaps, only half of parents are aware. So potential work being done, especially as important as programming is in this district, and what people think about the quality of education, as we've seen before. Specific perceptions. The first one out of the chute is, does the district spend taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently? And I put up the history going back to 2018. In 2019, you were at extraordinarily high 84%. You went back to 64%. First off, the norm on that is about 54, 55%. So you're still running above the norm. But you look at the disagreement, it hasn't really moved from 11 to 13. It all went into the uncertainty. It's almost up 5 times. And when you look at that, it's non-parents. And it's specifically the overall quality of education, we saw that 15%. Now when we ask for specific details on what they think about finances, you have about 1 in 4 folks that don't have enough information on financial aspects. Do they trust the district to do what's right? This was an important question over the course of the last 15 years because there's been decision-making and trust issues with all the decisions that you've had to make for the school year. And still, you did go down 12 points from 91 to 79. The disagreement, though, it's not statistically significant increase. You have 8% saying unsure. Are they proud and would recommend the schools? 9-point drop, it all went into uncertainty. Disagreement did not change. Good job communicating, and we're going to see this more specifically when we look at parents, but overall the district in a very trying time of having to do communications. You know, you used to think of communications as something you build over a semester, a trimester, a quarter, a month, what have you. It's been day to day for 15 months, and so 78% is very, very strong. Are the schools a good value for the investment? That's down 9 points, but it all went into uncertainty because you have more people not aware of what they're investing in the schools on the financial portion of it. Satisfaction with decision-making, a 13-point drop, all went into uncertainty. 3 new questions. The school district only considers asking for a property tax increase after careful consideration of all alternatives. 67% agree with that statement. Only 15% disagree, but you have 18% that are unsure. Does the district do a good job of involving the community? This one, with cities and school districts, has been very difficult over the pandemic because it's been very difficult to involve the community when you're doing things virtually and by Zoom. So the norm before the pandemic on this was 75%. It's dropped back down to 65%, with a lot more people saying, I don't know, how can I be involved? And then the bottom question is, I always call it the dipping the toe in the water question. And the question is, the schools are a good investment, and I would support a property tax increase to protect that investment. We haven't told them if it's an operating levy or a bond referendum, if it's 10 cents a month or $10 a year. They have no understanding of what it's for. How many people in concept disagree? The core opposition. It's 24%. Anytime at the outset you're under 30%, to us that tells us the community's willing to have a discussion. And there's going to be a reason for that drop that we're going to see in the disagreement. Job performance ratings. Now these, I guarantee you, would have been very different in the fall. But as things have opened up, people feel much better about the governance and the administration. You do have drops, but they all go to the uncertainty. The school board is 61 to 19. It's a 3-to-1 ratio. Norm on that is 1.5 to 1. And there was a point last October where it was basically 1-to-1. 45-45 across the state. The administration and superintendent, 61 to 18, about 3.5 to 1. Roughly, norm on that is 2-to-1. But on both of those, you can see uncertainty is 1 in 5. And the teachers, 82% favorable, 6% unfavorable. You do have a doubling of the uncertainty. And you're the first district now in the last 4 months where we haven't seen a statistically significant increase in the unfavorable ratings on teachers. Teachers, regardless of whether the school district has had labor peace in the whole how to handle the pandemic, non-parents have localized national issues. So they hear San Francisco suing the teachers union, or Chicago, or New York, and then they think this is happening here. Your teachers still extraordinarily well regarded. Financial management, 58% favorable, 19% unfavorable. No change in the unfavorable, but you can see when we're asking financial matters, it's almost a constant 1 in 4 that just say, I don't have enough information. The norm on this one is 50% favorable. This was surprising to us, having worked with Prior Lake Savage Area School District for so long. Normally, when myself or my business partner have come out here, we've always said your property tax climate is hostile. This is the first time that we say your property tax climate is tax sensitive. And the difference is the very high and somewhat high at 43%. It's under 50%, a majority saying their taxes are high. And you can see I put in the upper right hand, the high on total taxes is down 12 points. From 55 to 43 in 2019. On school taxes, you're down 25 points from 2019. It was previously 59%, it's now at 34%. So this doesn't mean that everybody loves the property tax increases is going to support it. It tells us, though, there's more of a willingness. The higher intensity you have on tax hostility, because remember on election day, you want people to walk into the voting booth and simply make a cost-benefit analysis. How much does this cost, and what is the community receiving? And when you have a lot of tax hostility, you really can't get to that cost-benefit because you're just reactive to, I can't afford this, or my taxes are already too high. So there is a willingness, and then this also goes into that drop that we saw in the core opposition, down to 24%. Now, a common theme that we have seen since last May when we started asking, we shut down for about a month when the pandemic started and then started up again. And the question, do you believe your local school district is adequately funded? I think a lot of people made the assumption with the pandemic starting, and before the pandemic, it was 45% said yes, 45% said no. And people thought there'd be more people saying no, they're not adequately funded. In fact, the reverse has happened, and it continues to grow. The norm on this is 68%. You're at 66% saying you're adequately funded. There's two parts to this, and there's a third part potentially coming on the horizon on this perception. The first is people believe that a lot of money was saved last spring when schools were shut down. You didn't have to heat buildings, air condition buildings, clean buildings, and that created a savings. Secondarily is the federal COVID relief bailout fund. People don't understand that it's specific purposes. They don't understand one-time money. They hear a big number. They don't understand how it relates to the percentage of the overall district budget. And that continues. And then you have the looming budget agreement, or whenever they get around to that in St. Paul, where they're going to say they gave you money. And so all of those things, it's important to communicate what the pandemic did cost, what the federal dollars really do mean for Prior Lake Savage Area School District, and any sort of whatever St. Paul gives you, what that means too. Put it into something that people understand and can relate to. Technology. Well, as we saw the adequacy of funding perceptions increase that schools are adequately funded. The other surprising thing over the last 15 months is the number of people that say technology is absolutely essential has continued to go down. We've seen this drop over the last 3 to 4 years. Going back to 2017, the absolutely essential was about 65%, saying in a district. Before the pandemic, it had gotten down to 45%. Now we're under 40% saying absolutely essential. They don't go into the somewhat, not to, or not at all category. They go from absolutely essential to very important. It's an important distinction, though, because it goes from a have to have to a nice to have. And what the pandemic has shown people is that technology in and of itself is not the panacea for education. It's important to have, but it's not absolutely essential. And in fact, in a statewide that we shared with AMSD and that group this spring, when we asked people, the pandemic, has it caused you to think that, in the future, technology is going to be the way for education, or is it classrooms and teachers? It's 85% across the state saying it's education in the classroom with teachers. You do have 52% saying absolutely essential. So that's more than 10 points higher than the norm. This district is valuing technology as absolutely essential more than we're typically seeing. When we ask them about the rating for technology opportunities in the school district, 77% say excellent or good, only 5% say only fair, nobody said poor, and 17% were unsure. So the perception, well, it's essential, is overall that your technology opportunities are good. So a discussion on a tech levy is going to be how to move the good to the excellent. And the key will be making sure that they understand that it's not to keep kids at home distance learning. It's how the technology is going to be used in the classroom in the future. What's the predisposition of the resident? This question is simply, if you hear a property tax increase is being requested, are you for any, are you against all, or are you persuadable? For some and against others. 24% are against all. That goes right back to that first dipping the toe in the water, that 1 and 4. 21% are for all, and 53% are persuadable. So at the outset, you're -3. Of people that have an opinion, you have 3% more people saying they're going to vote against all than support all. That's a very manageable number. Anytime we're better than -8 at the outset, because you're always going to have basically a majority of people in the persuadable category, and that's going to be the critical piece. We asked for a dollar amount, and now the 24% in concept that are against a property tax increase, when you ask for a dollar amount, you pick up 6% as saying, well, there's not a dollar amount I would support. Anytime that nothing is below 35%, the community is willing to have a discussion. And so if we look at the tax tolerance level that comes in the community as a whole, comes in roughly at about $12, $13 a month. Now, that number is not set in stone. It's meant to establish guardrails. And for you to understand that the further you go away from that level of tax amount on the average property, the more hostility there will be unless it includes items that people highly support. So in helping numerous, over the last 5 years, we've had multiple districts go for twice the amount, if not 3 times the amount, because the package includes components that are highly valued. So when we specifically test $3.5 million of a capital projects levy for technology, and we tell them it would create a dedicated source of funding for education technology so that every K-12 student could continue to have their own school district issued device. Funding would also be used for instructional software, networking infrastructure, staff to support the use of technology. And we told them on a $400,000 home, it would be $17 a month, $500,000, $21 a month. So comes in roughly at about $19. So it's about 50% higher than the tax tolerance. You can see you have strong support because you're asking, the source of the money is supported. It goes to 63% support to 26% opposition. If we look at intensity at the outset, it's 2-to-1 strong support versus strong opposition. Now, what's the reason for their position? At the outset, before the campaign, the top two reasons for support, the blue bars, are the importance of technology and the importance of education. What will, over the course, if you decide to go for the tech levy, it will have to be need is what drives people to go vote in off-year elections. So at the outset, 7% say need, and then you do have a series of students need their own device, needed for distance, reasonable cost, need software. So you do have about 24% right now saying it's a need purpose, but that's what needs to be driven. What are the reasons for opposition? Well, tax hostility is down. So 8% say the taxes are too high. You can see only 2% actually say the cost of what you're asking for on my house is too high. So it's not necessarily, it's not a decision based on taxes or cost. Poor spending, no need, too focused on technology, reasons for opposition. Now, once we have the pretest, and we haven't given them any messages, okay? The point of the pretest is so you don't make somebody atypical and they have pieces of information that other people don't have. Then we can test messages to see if it impacts people's opinions. And so the first, on this one, for arguments and support, the statement is simply, it is important to invest in technology-based safety and security enhancements at our schools. 52% of people say it makes them much more likely to support. It has an impact on 80%, indicating that, yes, I might be likely to support. The anytime, up-to-date technology is the key to ensuring students have connection to anytime, anywhere learning. 51%, much more likely. 29%, somewhat more likely. To fully offer cutting-edge technology opportunities, like neighboring school districts, technology spending for classroom must be increased. 36% very likely, impact than 67%. And then finally, to keep competitive with top-rate area school districts, Prior Lake, Savage area schools should be ranked higher in technology spending, 32 and 30. If we look at arguments in opposition, you can see the impact is less than the arguments in support. What leads the list is the funding for schools is adequate and they need to spend the money they have better. 26% much more likely to oppose. Because, and looking back in the past, the key reason for opposition has always been taxes in the past. Because of the shift from hostile to sensitive, it's in second place. With local property taxes are going up too quickly, we can't afford to put more taxes on for education on the backs of homeowners, 24%. And then being able to use technology effectively and efficiently is given too much emphasis in school today's, 21%, indicate that makes them much more likely to oppose. So when we come back and do a post-test, and on this one, just to refresh, we start out at 63-26, and with this information, we go 64-27. You've picked up a point in opposition and a point in support. What is atypical here, there's two things on this. We've given them a lot of information. Now you still have 1 in 10 people saying, I'm unsure. Okay, normally that shrinks by, easily by half, and it only shrunk by 2 points. The other thing, when we look at the parent sample, it basically mirrors the overall community. So at a successful off-year election, parents have to be highly supportive. And so it's going to be important because parents are the ones most burned out with technology over the course of the last 15 months to make sure and show them what this means for education in the classroom. We added a few new questions. First off, open-ended question, what does equity mean to you? And we've asked this in multiple school districts over the past 8 months, and yours is the most scatological, kind of idiosyncratic all over the place. Basically 1 rises to the top. It's just equal opportunities, 1 in 4. And then you have 1 in 10 people talking about treat students all the same, high quality for all, equal access, and fairness. We then asked 4 statements and asked, do you agree or disagree with the statement. The first one is decision makers and the school district support and embrace the community's racial diversity. 70-7, but you have 24% unsure. Teachers and staff in the district understand and respond to the cultural and emotional needs of students of color to help them be successful academically. 66-7, but 27% are unsure. District staff have the knowledge and skills needed to work with a racially diverse community, 61 to 11, 29% unsure. And school district staff reach out to community members of color in meaningful ways and seek input on school decisions, 49 to 7 with 45% unsure. You can see if people have an opinion on those four statements, they're much more likely to agree than disagree. But you do have a lot of uncertainty. And it's not surprising that last one, think back when we asked about community involving the community. There's a higher level of uncertainty because people don't know necessarily all the ways that people can be involved, and the district seeks output in these different times that we've been living in. What's the primary source of information? Well, the word of mouth leads. This is open-ended. They can tell us anything. 1 in 5 say a word of mouth. I get it from somebody else. 19% say the local newspaper, 18% the district newsletter, 12% district website, 12% email. And so we've seen this, the grapevine, as local newspapers, and your local newspapers are still comparatively strong to a lot of other districts. But as districts have lost the local newspaper, the non-parent has gone to the grapevine more than anything else to get their information. That's the transformation. And so with your district now, you have 2 items on there, word of mouth and local newspaper, that are non-district sources of information. And then you have the district newsletter, district website, and emails from the district, about 42% indicating they're getting their information from the district. What about their level of information? It was 71% saying they were very or somewhat informed 2 years ago. It's 68% indicating very or somewhat informed. Still relatively strong, considering it's a whole different paradigm that people are grading this on this time than in 2019. Are they satisfied with the amount of information? 2008-19 was really unique, where you had 14% of people saying I'm getting too much information. That's gone back to the traditional 2%, indicating too much, and the too little. It's normally between 15 and 20%. We call them the insatiables. If they met with the superintendent every Monday morning for coffee and went over the budget, it would not be enough information. So overall, you're creating the balance and the level, the satisfied with the amount of print that folks are receiving. We'll go through this quickly. Sources of information. This is the green bar, pulls out the 2021 in comparison to the 2018. So the district newsletter is down 17 points from 2019. Cable access, we're down to 5% watching cable access. The district website, up to 43%. District emails, up 10 points to 34%. Teacher emails, up to 28%. Building newsletters, still about 1 in 5. The local weekly newspaper, it's up 6 points, but it's below 50%. Superintendent's column, it stayed right in that 35 to 40% range. Teachers, 30%. Informal discussions with friends and neighbors, it actually went down to 48%, but we have a whole bunch of people, instead of saying a lot and some, saying what is the third category? I'm blanking. Oh, they get a little information from it, and that actually makes it go up to 80% total impact. Community education catalog, about 1 in 5 the last 2, and district social media. We've seen this drop coming, and we've seen it as social media has become less reliable. You have a lot fewer people saying, I really get a lot of information from it, because it's almost become, in some sense, a scarlet A in that sense. And so we do see this on social media continue to go down. Newspapers, the Prior Lake American has stayed stable since 2019. You can say it's down. You can see it's down from 60% 2018, but it's 48%. The Savage Pacer did drop by about half since 2019, from 31 to 17%. What's the best way to receive information? And now There's always been differences between the overall sample and parents, but it really has bifurcated now. And the whole pandemic and the parents' reliance on email as like a day-to-day lifeline to understand what was happening the next day for their students is really kind of set. And so if we look at the community as a whole, and for the blue bars, I typically look at print versus electronic, so you can see what's the preference. Email, 25%, website, 13%, social media, 4%. 42% say they prefer electronic. Print, 24% newsletter, 23% local newspaper, so 47% indicate that it's print. You still have pretty much equal on that. You are unique that you have 8% say this, they could volunteer, I prefer word of mouth to get information from somebody else. But you can see the parents it's overwhelmingly electronic now, with 61% saying email, 12% saying the website, 2% social media. And so the switch is now over with parents in the preference of mail versus print. It's still a tie amongst the community as a whole. And then the last section will look at parents only, just talking about the pandemic. And has the district done a good job communicating plans this year? There's been a lot of plans to communicate, and there's been a lot of, in a timely manner. Yet 85% of parents agree that you've done a good job communicating this year. That's outstanding. You can see you have 11% or 13% say no. Look at the ratio of intensity. It's 5-to-1, strongly yes versus strongly no. We went through each of these and asked about a rating, excellent, good, or unfavorable. I pulled out, the excellent is the dark blue, the lighter blue is the good, and I just combined the only, fair, and the poor. Education quality overall, 75-24. In-person learning, 72-17. Hybrid, 58-31. Distance, 52-43. And this is what we've seen now as we've tested. Once we got into November, December, we started testing in-person, hybrid, distance. Hybrid was pretty much mirroring the results of distance. It was not seen necessarily as a solution. In fact, some parents were saying it kind of took the worst of both worlds, and it just didn't work as well as people anticipated. So in distance, the norm on this across the state is 50-50. Coming out of last year, the last school season, it was 35% favorable to 65% unfavorable. So districts have done a better job with distance, but it's obviously not been the ideal in the minds of parents. Social distancing, 62 to 16. Cleanliness of buildings, well, we have a lot less people evaluating it. As parents were telling us, we haven't been allowed in the buildings with our students. So those that had an opinion or for what they've heard from their students, 61-4. Busing, 52-6. Childcare, 25-3. School meal distribution, 70-4. Do your parents feel comfortable sending their children to school in the fall? 92% say very or somewhat. 5% not to or not at all, 3% are unsure. We've been coming in now in the past six to 8 weeks with about 90% of parents indicating that they're either very or somewhat comfortable. Where your difference is, you have about 15% more saying very comfortable versus somewhat comfortable. You have a lot more intensity of parents saying, yeah, I'm very comfortable sending my kids back. But really 9 and 10 is what we've seen, and that's what you have. And then finally, we asked this question we've asked it, I think the first one was back in August, using a full-time online option. If it were offered after the pandemic, what's the interest level? And you can see your parents, 4% say they're very likely, 11% somewhat likely, 15% not too likely, and 66% say there's no way. And so we've had at a high level about 25% in some school districts. Now that has waned as the school year has gone on, that this is a potential year-round solution for their family. But if you do standard marketing projection, you take half of the very likely and a third of the somewhat likely, you have maybe about 4 to 5% that would be interested, which then kind of mirrors back to the 5% that say they're not too comfortable or not at all comfortable. So I'll open it up to questions. It's a lot of information. You can kind of lead. Let me know what do you want more details on?
Okay. Anyone have any questions or anything you want to discuss? Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Okay, one of my first questions is, well, first of all, are we going to get the rest of the graphs in the board book?
I don't think they downloaded correctly in our board book.
Okay, they just didn't download. Okay, I thought.
Yeah, for some
I
reason.
noticed it wasn't just me, everyone was looking at it.
Yeah.
Oh, look at it, okay.
So I think it just needs to be refreshed. Yeah.
When the technology question was asked, the first one, I can't remember what, it was earlier on when we talked about, or was it? Trying to find it. There was a bunch of questions asked. I was wondering if they were open-ended. I'm trying to, the reason for the levy position and the technology.
Yeah,
You didn't specify, but I thought you were kind of alluding to the other questions being open-ended. Was this one open-ended? It was on,
this one?
yes,
Yes, this is open-ended.
okay.
Yep.
In there, one of the things that I wanted to ask is, when the whole discussion of is technology important, have we asked that same type of question before the pandemic? Do we have a comparison to that?
The importance of technology?
The importance of the technology need for education. You know, you kind of said, did everyone need a device and all that kind of stuff? And what I'm trying to get at is, I know a lot of parents who went off and bought their own devices for their kids. So they didn't have to do all their homework on an iPad. And I'm wondering if that has impacted it. And if there was an open-ended question, did you hear any of that? Or are they just trying to answer specifically the question that you asked?
They're answering specifically the reason for their position on the tech levy. This, if we go back here, on the rating, I would look at that more of the rating of the technology opportunities in the school district. The right-hand pie would tap into their perceptions of what the current is in the district. And so overall, the current technology is people think that the opportunities, they're very good. I mean, they're favorable. And so that discussion then in showing people, I kind of think like 20 years ago, I've been doing this long enough now, in the 90s there was this insatiable appetite for technology. You put any technology question on in the 90s and people supported it. And then 2000 hit, part of Y2K, for those around, and people started saying, I don't know if we need as much technology. And what districts started to do is do almost like tours of the classroom, keeping in mind that a lot of people haven't been in a classroom. I grew up with a chalkboard in a classroom, and so they were doing tours of what a whiteboard was with the senior community and everything like that, and reintroducing them to that. And so this piece also, in the shift from good to excellent, it's important when you have a majority of people saying it's absolutely essential, you'll want more people saying it's excellent than good. And so then the discussion is the tech levy, what is in it that's going to provide the district to go from good to excellent? They don't believe it's only fair or poor. It's nuanced, and it's important to show, once again, the classroom and how it impacts.
So I had two more questions in that line too. You asked the same type of question and the reason for the levy. And I got to find the exact slide. These slides weren't numbered on mine, so I got a little confused here. But I was wondering when you asked that particular question, if that was an open-ended question on the reason for the levy, and I'm trying to find that.
This question is open-ended.
That was open-ended too?
Yep.
Okay. And then the other thing is when you asked information about how people liked to get information, and email was on there, did anyone say they were looking at, let's say, their kids' Schoology or of the parents to get information about what was going on in the class, or the Infinite Campus, or any of the tools we have versus just email?
We didn't break it down to that level. I mean, because what we do in an open-ended is just, we collapse them down into categories. And so we typically cut to slice it that way would get too small and just collapse them into more general categories.
Okay.
Would that be more similar to website, though? Because to get into their Schoology, you have to go through the website?
Not
Do you think?
necessarily. The thing is I'm not sure a lot of people actually go to the district website. And that's why I was curious about the best way. So as we're delivering information to them, is it really a raw email, or are they getting the information through their kids' email, through the, what is perceived as a link to the, to the school information with regards to their students? Because you made a specific comment in there about if they wanted to find out about what their kid needed to do the next day, email was the way. And and that was a little confusing to me, because I know a lot of parents are, looking into their class information specifically for that class using the tools that the district provides versus going to a generic email account.
Right, and they could tell us, so this list, I'll give you the percents for the parents. This is the overall. So they can say multiple, and so on the district website, 68% of parents say they use the district website to get information. 79% emails from the district, 72% emails from teachers. So I mean, it's, those three dominate in parents. I mean, and if you add up, it's a 4-part category. They can say a lot, some, little, or none at all. 7% say they don't get any information from emails. 8% from emails from the district. 8% say they don't get any information from emails from teachers, and 16% say they get no information from the district website. So you have 84%, 92%, and 93% of parents indicating they get information from emails from the district itself, teachers, or from the website.
Anyone else have a question? Jonathan? Yeah.
The questions regarding equity, meaning of equity, those were questions, if I'm understanding correctly, that the respondents were giving you their, open-ended in their version.
Yep.
Their definitions. And the diversity statements, we were asking them how they feel the district addresses those things.
Right, do they
So
agree?
there really, there wasn't necessarily anything directly soliciting their opinions about what was going on. It was more their perception
Right.
about what's going on.
Right. Yeah, because equity is a term now, I think back, and education has had these through the years of serving. The first time I ever saw it was in accountability with Jesse Ventura. Accountability had a lot of different meanings to where you were politically, your age, all of those sorts of things. Equity is very similar. That it means different things to different people depending on where you are in your stage in life. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of shows the difference in the opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
I just want to, curious, when you were doing the phone interviews, did you get a perception how people defined technology? Or did you define it for them and then they responded? How did that work?
For the technology as a whole,
Correct.
no, we didn't ask them to define technology. We told them about the tech levy, what the uses would be for specifically for the tech, the one-on-one, and I read it earlier, the software and that sort of thing.
I mean, of the open-ended questions, did you see any bias towards one definition or another? I'm just kind of curious because it's a very broad term, even though you've defined it to them as far as what it encompasses. It's just about everything regarding infrastructure right now. So I'm just kind of curious if we go out with a tech levy, even though we can put definitions on paper, is there anything that people in general that you interviewed were predisposed to believe as a definition?
No, we did not go that route with them. No, we haven't on technology ever. I mean, it's simply telling them what the funds would be used for specifically. And then there will be times where people will come back and say, I mean, when you come back and tell them it's going to be all used for staff and teacher training for technology, people don't like that. So that would be the reason for, you know, I can think of two tech levies in the past where that's the primary use of funding. And that hasn't been received well. It's, you know, in the past, in the history, it's in classroom learning. And any sort of supplement to that that's deemed as necessary.
Can you go into a little more like you were saying, that's what I wanted to ask about, was the necessities that go with it, or that they see as favorable? You know, I saw Edina, they went out for one.
Yep.
And, I mean, there were parking lots on one of the questions, and I was like, So.
Well, that was
their operating? I'm assuming.
That was the $7 million bond referendum that they threw on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but that was my question, is just, like, what are those necessities, or what do people equate technology or necessities with technology?
I
think
and do you want to?
Just append to the question, because I think it was sort of in that, if you read the referendum predisposition question again, I think it was pretty clear. Could you go back and share just the details of how that was phrased? Because I think that kind of summed.
The uses of funding specifically?
Yeah.
It was.
That people were asked about.
Dedicated source of funding for educational technology, so every K-12 student could continue to have their own school district issued device. Funding would also be used for instructional software, networking infrastructure, and staffs to support the use of technology. So that was the specific of the $3.5 million tech levy that we tested. You know, as I mentioned, just for teacher training, staff training, and everything, people don't resonate to that. But people understand, it's almost like technology needs its own deferred maintenance. Like a building needs a new roof, you need new infrastructure for bandwidth and everything like that. So talking about it that way also is helpful, because it's still improving the classroom education. If you don't have the bandwidth, and especially now, you know, Edina was a lot of discussion and working with them. You know, it was also about textbooks and software and everything like that, because that shift has obviously happened in that sense.
Well, and I even think of security. I mean, and we have upped our game in security, but we've also done that to the expense of the general fund, and cameras and like all the technology that belongs with that, you know, new doors, you know, door technology, IDs and all that kind of thing. I mean, there's a lot of technology involved with that as well. That
Radios.
Yeah, I mean,
and that continues. You know, doing this long enough, Columbine, when that happened in the late 90s, for a couple years, there was an insatiable demand then for security and safety and security, and it did wane. Newtown, Connecticut, it has not changed since then. And whether it's bond referendums for safety and security, technology, that will lead the list. In any district when you talk about enhancements to safety and security. At the same time, you'll have 95% of parents say the district provides a safe learning environment. You'll have 95% say, I'll support a tax increase for it. It's almost like it just never has shifted since Newtown, Connecticut.
yeah, Michael.
This may not be a question for you, but you had mentioned about when we talk about our funding, whether it's COVID relief funding, state funding, and we'll talk more about that tonight amongst each other. You said make sure we put it in terms people can understand, and you just used the analogy of a roof or whatever, right? Do you have any suggestions? Do you make an analogy to a household budget? Do you have any insights on that? How do you make it tangible when we're talking about big numbers that
The percents.
Percents, okay.
But percent, because if, I don't, this doesn't apply, I don't know what you received in COVID relief, but did a presentation in January where they found out that that district was getting $5 million. That district's budget is, put it in context, it's 5%.
Yeah.
And it's specific uses over the next 2 years. It's not an operating levy over the course of 10 years. It's putting it in that level.
Okay.
Similarly, when the legislature does 1 and 1 or whatever, nobody has any idea on that sort of thing. On the federal number, the number you heard on the with the Biden's package was at $126 billion or trillion going to school districts. It's across the country. That's the number people remember. What does that mean for your school district? Put it into terms, but percents do work the best.
Thanks.
I've got a question on the percent thing really quick, if I may jump on what she just said, because, when you go to the $10 or $20 a month, considering how, in relative speaking terms, we currently don't have any type of tech levy, and our ops levy is fairly low overall. When you put it into percent, sometimes that can actually elevate it. So I personally would resonate more with a $10 to $20 a month, because that's like less than what people pay on coffee for themselves. And that's why, so is it a dollar value as a percentage? Is it a percentage of the overall tech budget? I mean, what?
No, I was answering her question with kind of, discussing about funds coming in. To yours with, if you decide to go for a tech levy, and that's a perfect example, $3.5 million. Doesn't mean anything to people in that sense. What matters is how much it costs them.
Right.
And so, absolutely, on a levy or a bond referendum. But it's always, we tell them the dollar amounts, White Bear Lake, with $326 million bond referendum, but it was $10 a month on the average house. You have to put it down to, that's what matters. Yeah, you'll have people say that's a lot of money, but then how much does it cost them on the specifics? But when you're talking about funding coming in, it's important to put it in that percentage parameter for them, than just this is the number.
Federal funds that we got were kind of like the stimulus checks. They're gone.
And I don't think it was a 10-year. Yeah, I think so.
I'll just make one comment. I'm surprised to hear that you were tax sensitive now. I've been sitting here for 11 years, and it's always been tax hostile. Is always the quote line that I've heard you say, so I don't know what that does exactly for us, but
It makes people willing to have a conversation.
yeah.
And make that. Trust me, I was.
Yeah.
Well, everything's pretty much following along with what we typically see. And I said to my business partner, Prior Lake doesn't have 67% saying their taxes are high. It means, and that does not mitigate the fact that there's still tax sensitivity. But people are willing to have a discussion when they're not simply saying, my taxes are too high, I don't want to pay for anything. And it becomes then, you have more people that, every referendum, every request has a percent of people that want to but can't afford to. Mm-hmm. Okay? And when you go from hostility to tax sensitivity, that's just much more heightened, because you won't have the opponent saying, I'm just against this because I don't want any increase in taxes.
Okay, anyone else?
I just want to, Peter, thank you. We've had a long-standing relationship with you, and as you continue to help us gather perspective from our community members and our stakeholders so that we can make really wise decisions moving forward. I just want to thank you for your time, energy, and continued work with us.
Super. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, my mask broke. I'll sneak out this door then so I don't.
Thanks, Peter. So as Marcus is coming on, if it's all right, Chair Will, I know that Peter shared a lot of information. You know, certainly this is the community survey that we do every 2 years. We did do it early instead of waiting till next fall, which would have been the normal time that we did it. We did want to do it early as you were asking us to plan forward so that we could seek perspective from our community members, specifically around the technology levy. But we certainly got a lot of other information that we'll continue to take a look at. I think now for Marcus's presentation, if you can kind of sit back in, that data that you just heard around the technology levy, and Marcus is going to share also new information that was gathered from our stakeholders regarding the use of technology. So with that, Director of Technology, Marcus Milazzo, thank you.
The school board, Dr. Stello, good evening. My name is Marcus Milazzo, and I'm the Director of Technology for Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. Before I begin this presentation, I want to big thank you to Chrislyn, Christy, and Danny Kleiss for all the work that they did in gathering the data and processing the data so that this presentation was ready. They had a really short window, did a fantastic job, so thank you. Okay. I promise I'm going to stand in front of this the whole night. If I don't, so our overview tonight is it's an update on the staff and student feedback regarding devices that they use for instruction and other job responsibilities. We did the survey back in the fall, and that's when we were in a distance learning mode. It was really important to get our staff and student voices from the survey. They just lived a year of distance and hybrid learning, so with the devices that we provide. So it's mission critical to hear how it went, what worked, what could be improved upon, and we really wanted those voices and to bring it forward to the board tonight. So let's jump into the results. I'm going to do this for every slide. So this is a check all that applies type of question so that you know where we're at, whether it's open, ranked choice, check all that applies. So this is a check that all that apply because we have staff that work in multiple buildings. But we sent the staff survey via email. We had 324 responses. In the fall, we had 417. So not as many, but you know, it's the end of the year. People are super busy trying to wrap things up. So it was a good turnout. You can see who responded at what grade level there. The next question was a check all that applies, and what type of device do you use for your current role? And this is a comparison from fall 2020 and spring 2021. And you'll see there that in the fall was MacBook Airs were a little bit more than in the spring, and HP desktops were a little less, and then more in the spring. And those were the top two. My reasoning for that is that in the fall we were distance, so people were using their mobile device. And in the spring, when we started coming back to hybrid, is that people started leveraging the desktops in the classrooms more. And because desktops are connected to the classroom AV, so that's my interpretation of why those numbers changed from fall to spring. Next question was a check all that applies, and which are the main technology programs and or tools you use to complete your job responsibilities. These were the top three. Internet with 319 responses, create and edit documents at 306, and then collaborated with colleagues through various means. So those were the top three. Next question was an open response. Which functions or tasks do you wish you could accomplish but cannot because of your current device? So top one was see how students view sites and apps, troubleshoot student devices or their issues, and write on the screen with 86 responses. Second was use your camera to take a picture of student work. Third was desktop and iPad combo to work in classroom and understand student experience. And number 4 was see more on the screen at more than one at a time. I'd like to break these down a little bit. I think number 1 deals with the fact that when we went last March, when we said, okay, we had 2 weeks to plan and for distance, and then subsequent weeks after that, we collected all the staff iPads and redistributed those to students because there was a need to get all the devices in the hands of students. So we took a tool from the staff that they were using, which was an iPad, At that time, they had an iPad, a MacBook Air, and a desktop. And we took a tool that they had been using for a number of years and said, you have a MacBook Air, we need the iPads for students. So not having the same device as a majority of the students, or potentially the students that they're teaching, can make it very difficult to troubleshoot, or if you're in that app-centric iOS environment where it's, hey, I'd like to use this app, but it's not on Mac OS, but it is on iOS. So I think that's where we see those numbers elevated. Also, the MacBook Airs and the Chromebooks have a forward-facing camera. The iPads have a camera on the back and on the front. So if you're trying to capture student work, an example of that, it's more difficult to do that on a MacBook Air or a Chromebook than it is an iPad. The desktop iPad combo, whether you're using your desktop connected to Classroom AV, and if we're thinking like this is our classroom and this desktop is connected to all the AV equipment in this room, lots of screens to look at, but having that iPad to do something else, whether it's Apple Classroom or working on apps that kids are working on, that's a big piece of it as well. And then more screen real estate, and that's something that we heard in the fall, and you can never have too many screens, but in order to, if you're doing a Google Meet on one device and you want to showcase something on another device, or even see your kiddos' faces while you're teaching, it's important to have that screen real estate. So moving on to the next question. This was a ranked choice question, and these are the top 2 first choices. So again, there was ranked choice. These are the top 2 first choices. If you could choose which device to use for work purposes, what would your preference be? So you can see the ranking there is MacBook Air and a Windows desktop. Next question is ranked choice, and then what we did was we were showcasing the top 3, and then we also combined first and second. So again, ranked choice, we have the first choice listed there, but then we combine first and second for totals, okay? If you could choose which device students would use, what would your preference be? Again, I want to make sure that everybody's following that question. If staff could choose which device students would use, what would your preference be? Number 1 would be an iPad with a keyboard. It was first choice with a rate of 72, but when you combine that ranked choice first and second, its combined total was 172. Yes, Mary?
Was that ranked choice off of a list, or is this a free-form question?
It was off a list.
So
Well,
what
wait, let me verify that. It was off a list. It was Chromebooks, iPads with keyboards, MacBook Airs, Microsoft Surface, and Windows laptops were what was provided as choices.
Thank you.
You're welcome. iPads were first choice coming in at 71, with a combined first and second at 143, and Chromebooks were first choice at 79, but when you combine first and second, they came in at 119. Just want to be full disclosure, we've had a number of support tickets rise with Chromebooks, and I want to be extremely transparent with the board. We have seen the number of Chromebook repairs since we took them out of the carts and put them in the hands of students, and they are grades 2 through 5 with our current deployment. The number of support tickets and repairs for Chromebooks has skyrocketed for us. And I feel there's a number of reasons for that. A Chromebook is a $200 and some odd device, and the build quality is what it is. They're fantastic devices. I'm not ripping Chromebooks right now, but just there's a difference in build quality. It's got a screen, it's got a hinge, so there's a moving part, and we don't have cases on the Chromebook. So I just wanted to share, here's what student device use, what their preference would be, but just wanted to be really transparent is that the iPads with the OtterBox cases, which are the older ones, cases make a huge difference, and build quality makes a huge difference too. So just wanted to share that with the board, saying that as we support all the devices that we've deployed, we have seen an uptick in a certain type of device and repairs that go with that. So.
And Marcus, the age, you mentioned the age of the kids that you're handing them out to now, and they're taking them home, that I think that plays.
Absolutely. It's taking them out of a cart where it's grab and go versus it's going home each and every day to and from school, in a backpack. It's more wear and tear on the devices. And that's great because we want the students to use them and take them for anytime, anywhere learning, but it's a different type of deployment. So you're naturally gonna see that. Next question was open responses, and what are some examples of how you use your instructional technology has changed or improved over the past year? And I'm going to read these for our listening audience. I'll just go through these really quickly since they are quotes and people at home can't see them. First quote is, I am able to do so much more using technology after this past year. Managing meetings, Seesaw activities, competency, and Google Drive, the pandemic has forced me to become a very competent and comfortable with many technology tools, end quote. Next quote. I've discovered and I'm using many new, to me, apps and websites, end quote. And the last quote is, I have been using Google Meet more frequently, end quote. I think that would be a reoccurring theme for everybody, especially while we were in distance learning. Next question was an open response, and is what aspects of instructional technology are going well, and what should be maintained? So again, open-ended, we did not provide a list. The answers are 79, access to tech and apps. Teacher-powered devices came in second. One-to-one devices came in with 50 responses. Variety at 19. Virtual meetings 15, and tech support at 13. Again, the reoccurring theme, and something we heard back in the fall is staff. There's a big push to get staff iPads back. We've heard that throughout both surveys, and that, I would say, coincides with the addition of more screen real estate and having the same device that students are potentially learning on as well. So,
Is that regardless of age? I mean, like, all the way through, like, through high school? I mean, is there more push at elementary, at high school? I mean, does it matter, or just throughout the whole thing?
I would have to look at the results and dig down and see if it's a breakout by, if the themes or the trends are more elementary versus high school. I'd have to dig
I was
into
just
it.
curious if it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean they'd give up their MacBook?
No,
Okay.
not what they said.
That's- okay.
That's what I wanted to clarify too.
They want their
because-
iPad
Well,
back.
Back with their, okay, thank you.
Yeah, they want the iPad to emulate what the students are experiencing.
Yep.
And then they want the MacBook Air for the extra screen real estate and potentially even more screens on top of that, so they can do their teaching job while watching the students and helping the students on their personal devices.
Correct. That's what the feedback we're hearing. And then most buildings, but not all, have in their classroom a desktop computer as well. There's 2 buildings that we do not have desktops in the classrooms. And that's at the LC and Hamilton Ridge because of the design of the buildings and flexible learning spaces is that we did not put desktops in those 2 buildings. Okay.
Hamilton Ridge and which one?
The LC?
Oh,
I have a question, Marcus.
Yes.
Variety, I interpret that in a couple of different ways. It could be a smorgasbord of different topics that were all kind of thrown into one category, or it could mean that there's increased variety that was offered during the past school year. Can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it's just the opportunity to, whether it's more apps, different types of OSs, just a variety of, that was kind of our catch-all category. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Other questions about this slide?
I want to build on what Enrique said a little bit, because I remember hearing something about, particularly with the variety, and I'm not sure if this came up, that some teachers prefer the Google Meets or the Teams or Zoom, and a lot, I heard a lot of that from Variety. Did that come up too?
It did. At the beginning of last March, there was a big push. Zoom really came on the scene and they had a lot of feature sets and people were like, this is awesome, but then there was security concerns with it. So we had a problem with our G Suite for Education, which is now Google Workspace for Education Plus. We had a product that we could do, meetings, video conferencing, and granted, Google Meet has come a long way. It didn't have all the feature sets that Zoom had at the beginning, but they really have listened to educators and provided a lot of the wants that they, whether it's polls, Q&A, waiting rooms, kicking people out, locking it down. So, I mean, they've added a lot of feature sets over the past year to make it a very comparable and competitive product.
Well, I just wanted to ask about the variety, and then the other thing is we almost saw a 50-50 split, but not quite, between having a Windows desktop with the staff and then the MacBook. And so, between the presentation capability and the remote learning capabilities of the various tools, then you also have the various operating systems. And they're not polar opposite, obviously, especially these days.
Right.
But it does make a management consistency nightmare if we were to deliver that variety. And that is a concern, I assume.
We're delivering it now, and it is a challenge. I mean, when we have the Chrome OS, we have Windows 7, Windows 10 as we migrate and upgrade, and then the iOS and the Mac OS. So, yeah, every time you offer a new platform with a different OS, it does provide some challenges as far as support. But as you know, with Mac OS and Windows, they've come really, they're very similar as far as feel and function. They're obviously different companies, but and the tools that they provide on both operating systems, they're very similar. And a lot of it's web-based, so whether you're using the new Microsoft Edge browser or in Chrome or, Firefox, if that's what you choose, or.
And that's where I was thinking you were going to go with it too. Now that everything's web-enabled, the Core OS
Yeah.
probably doesn't matter as much then.
It takes some of that challenge away when you're dealing with a lot of web-based applications. It really does. Great.
I need to take up too much time. Thank you.
No, thank you. I really appreciate the feedback.
Marcus, just a question off that question a little bit. The staff survey went to both certified and support staff.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
And I don't know if you showed the breakdown, I apologize that I missed that, but also just right now, it is just certified staff that have the MacBooks.
That is correct.
So again, don't know, but wondering if, some of that, I like what I have. Sometimes that's how, it could be viewed. So it's an interesting question. I paused on it too the first time I saw it.
Yeah, appreciate that feedback. And as we move forward, as we continue the planning process, we can really dig into that certified staff, and we can break it out and get granular as, okay, here's what certified staff said as far as the devices that are preferred. And then the, support staff and then to Dr. Sell's point is if you're certified staff, you have a set of tools, and if you're a support staff, you have another set of tools. And so I think it would be important as we move forward to drill down into that and recognize that, certified staff may be using their tools differently than support staff, but there's a lot of crossover there. But I think it'd be worthwhile to dig into that. Okay. I think I jumped ahead here. Next question is an open-ended response. What aspects of instructional tech could be improved upon? I think we covered this. Did I go over this one? I feel like I'm in the classroom again. It's like, which
hour?
Which hour did I tell this to?
There was a bar chart.
Did we cover this one?
There was a bar chart.
No, I don't think so.
Is that separate?
Okay, so that's where we left off.
That's where we
Oh,
did that one. and
Thank
this
you.
one.
New slide, let's cover it. Open-ended response. What aspects of instructional tech could be improved upon? Device for teachers and staff use, 72 responses. Devices students use, again, having that same device that the students are on to help with the flow of information and troubleshooting and just like experiences was 58 responses. Functionality of the apps, or LMS, which is our learning management services or software, 44 responses, and then more instruction for staff, which is PD. We got 18 responses on that. Another open-ended response question: how does technology impact the way that you teach or do your job? And again, I will read these quickly for our listening audience. Quote, it enables me to use a wider variety of resources to teach reading. It helps me assess and record data. It helps me to communicate effectively with colleagues, end quote. Quote, I use technology every day to teach students, to communicate to parents in meaningful ways and support their understanding of what is happening. Students are able to do work on their iPads that is whole group, but all differentiated to meet their needs. It's a huge support to what I do daily, end quote. Quote, I use it every day. It's crucial. The thing that can be improved the most is the Chromebooks for students. They're often glitchy. We also need extras for students that forget their devices, end quote. Quote, allows for increased collaboration, end quote. And that's just a sampling, but some of the themes that we heard in the fall are what we're hearing in the spring, and we wanted to bring those forward.
Marcus, before you go into the student survey results, I do have one question with maybe a sub-question, and that's how long, the survey was given out when, and how long did they have to fill it out?
It was, for staff, we sent it out on the 13th, and it was closed on the 18th of May.
Is that a normal response time? I know teachers are incredibly busy these days.
They are incredibly busy, but we had a really tight window to get enough time to respond to the survey and then take that data and process it so that we could present it to the board tonight. So tight window. What we find, and others can agree or disagree, is that when we send out a survey, the people who are more likely to respond are going to respond right away and get to that survey as quickly as they can. If you leave it open for 2 weeks, sometimes that trails off and you just don't get the responses towards the end of that open window. So yeah, I do acknowledge it was a tight window, but we got it out as quickly as we could. And then quick turnaround time to get it and again, big thank you to Christy and Chrislyn and Danny, to take that information, a lot of open-end responses, so that takes a lot of time to crunch that and process that into a meaningful way, and then get that ready for the board tonight.
The reason why I asked the question is because the survey responses were pretty low, considering the number of teachers that responded, considering how critical the technology capability is and how they were so, these comments are pretty indicative of the fact that it was, obviously, it was an indispensable piece. It was also, sometimes a painful piece when it didn't work. So I would have expected that, the educators, even if it was just the certified staff or whomever it was sent out to be a little bit more wanting to give their 2 cents in here.
No. I hear exactly what you're saying. It's, as we all know, and we all lived through it, it's been an extremely long year. And I think that the teachers' focus right now is ending the school year on a really positive note for our kiddos. So I know that all of their energies is focused on really finishing the end of the year strong for that student experience. We are going to have a couple more opportunities to provide stakeholder feedback. We had a meet and confer meeting scheduled last week, but that had to be rescheduled. So we will be meeting with Meet and Confer, and I think there'll be other opportunities where we can collect those stories and hear people's voices. I don't think that's just because the survey closed, it'd be the last time we reach out.
Thank you for saying that.
Absolutely.
And thanks for spending the time to gather the input, because as busy as we know staff are, that was certainly an important component of this, both last fall and again now. So appreciate that, and those who were able to take the survey this time around, and then again seeking other perspectives as we plan forward.
Happy to do it. Are we ready to move on to the student survey? Okay, let's jump in. So this was a select one, and then obviously grades 3 through 5, we sent that through Clever, which is a syncing tool and portal that we use, and then grades 6 through 12, that was sent via Schoology. Kind of mirrors what the staff results from fall to spring. We had 1497 respond in the spring as opposed to 1733 in the fall. So there was a dip there, but again, it has been a long year for everybody. And, I'm just really proud of our students and staff for sticking it out and finishing strong. So there, just going back real quick, you'll see the breakout. Oops, sorry, as a pie chart. The next question was a check all that apply. And it was, which devices do you use for learning? And you see the majority are iPad and Chromebooks, because that's the devices we provide students. But I think everything else that you see here that's listed is personally provided. So it's personal devices. So Windows laptops at 137, Windows desktops at 108, MacBook Airs at 101, iPad with a keyboard 91, and then a Microsoft Surface at 17. So again, just to be very clear, we issued iPads and Chromebooks. So anything else that you see there is user provided or personal use. Okay? This was a check all that apply type question. In my current class, I use my iPad or Chromebook to access Seesaw and Schoology. And again, those are our learning management systems or learning management software that we provide as a district, and Seesaw is at the elementary levels, and Schoology is 6 through 12. And whether it's students setting up portfolios or teachers posting assessments and grades and assignments, I mean, that's how our staff are using our LMSs currently. So I expect to see that usage high because that is, when we were distance or hybrid, that was one of the main tools that teachers were using and students were accessing to complete their work. Google Meet shot way up. If we did this over a year ago, I don't think that number would be very high. So again, the need of being distance and hybrid, that's why Google Meet is as high as it is. Apps are referring to the iOS. You can also include apps for the G Suite, with the Google Drive and Sheets and Docs, if we consider those apps as well as just a different environment. Creating documents and then accessing the internet come in fourth and fifth. The next question was an open response. What classroom learning do you wish you could accomplish but cannot because of your iPad or Chromebook? Number one, and these are the top three that we're providing tonight. Typing. Lack of a physical keyboard. We heard that in the fall, and we're hearing that again in the spring. Not enough space on the screen. Again, going back to that whole screen real estate piece. And the third one was drawing or note-taking with, or note-making with a stylus, okay? Next question was a ranked choice, and these are the top three. If you could choose which devices to use for learning purposes, what would your preference be? Number one was a MacBook Air at 587 responses. Number two was an iPad with a keyboard at 331. And number three was a Chromebook at 282. Again, that was ranked choice, and there was a list, and I'm going to, because I know you want to know, so I will get that list for you and what we asked to rank choice. So please bear with me for just a second. Okay. iPad with a keyboard, MacBook Air, Microsoft Surface, or Windows laptop is the devices we listed for the students to rank choice. Okay. Next question was an open response, and what are some of the examples and how you use your iPad or Chromebook has changed or improved over the past year? I'll read these quotes quickly. Quote, I have become better at using technology and problem solving, end quote. Quote, I've gotten way more used to the daily homework and feel confident about my abilities on the device, end quote. Quote, all of my assignments are now in one place, so it's easier to find them and turn them in, end quote. And I think that quote speaks directly to those LMSs I was talking about, whether it's a Seesaw or Schoology. Last quote, being able to download documents right from Schoology into Notability and being able to write with my finger. For the Chromebook, I enjoyed the keyboard, end quote. So found that one really interesting because there's apps, whether you're using Schoology and Notability and being able to take the homework assignment, download it, write on it, but then I like the Chromebook because it has a physical keyboard. So again, that's just reinforced. Yes, Mary.
We did hear a lot, anecdotally, not formally, about inability to connect to printers and things like that in their home. Did that come up anywhere?
No, if it did, I'm going to go through the answers again and look for that, and I'll do a keyword search. But off the top of my head, I don't think that it didn't rise to the top as far as printer connectivity at home. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, I just heard a lot, and I'm using printers as an example
Yeah.
to print out homework or to print out worksheets or something like that.
will.
Enrique, you're shaking your head too.
Yeah. We heard it throughout the year, and then we opened some things up to allow the Chromebooks to be able to print. But as far as the results for this survey, it didn't rise to the top, but I will do my work and triple check that and see if that is something that I could circle back with the board and say, yeah, printers did come up, and here's the number that it did.
Well, it's not that important. I was just curious.
Yeah, I can ask Chrysalyn or Christy and Chrysalyn's shaking her head. No, I don't think it was a trend that I saw or noticed.
No, and remember this was student responses, so they might not have experienced the same frustration as parents.
Fair. But I'll do my homework and check and just look and see if printers did bubble up in any way, shape, or form. Okay? Other questions regarding this last slide? And Mary, I really appreciate you bringing that up because at the beginning of the year, we did hear that quite a bit. as far as can't print my assignments, and, you know, I'm working off of paper and electronic tonight, so there's a need for paper, and I get that, and having that printed homework assignment or that, you know, the assignment or what you're turning in, yeah, there's value to that. So I will triple check that and circle back, okay? Another open-ended response type question is, what are some of the ways that your iPad or Chromebook helps you learn both in the classroom and at home? Real quickly, going through the quotes here. Quote, helps me stay in contact with teachers and classmates, end quote. I get a lot of, quote, I get a lot of learning apps, end quote. Quote, helps me organize my things and I like having everything in one place, end quote. Last quote is, it helps me learn because I can reread or rewatch something that I missed, end quote. And as a parent of two kids, I can vouch for that last one, is that having the ability to go through an assignment and rewatch it or watch the video, rewatch it, listen to it again, there's a ton of value in that. It's just that reinforcement of, hey, I didn't understand it the first time, so let's go watch it again. And so I was really happy to see that response, and I've lived that as a parent. This question was open response. How could iPads or Chromebooks be improved to better support your learning? Number one answer, more apps. More apps. We have over 500 apps in our self-service that is available to students, but as we all know, you can never have enough apps. So we do our very best to really fine-tune that self-service library for students to access apps. And there's, last count, there's over 500, but well, there's new apps coming out every day, and we want more. Okay, thank you for the feedback. So, and I'm sure some of the apps that they want maybe won't make the cut list, but that's okay. That's okay.
Minecraft, I don't know, yeah, or something.
I'm okay with that. Second one was the keyboard, with, you know, physical keyboard, 110 responses. Loading speed, and that's one we kind of dug into. Is like, what are they talking about the device, or are they talking about Wi-Fi? Well, number 4 is better Wi-Fi. So those two kind of maybe going hand in hand. It's like, okay, are we talking the device processor? Are we talking Wi-Fi at home? Are we talking, are you on your phone's hotspot? I mean, we need to dig into that a little bit more and say, well, we know what we're providing here with Wi-Fi, you know, what our throughput is, and we have 2 SSIDs that we have, so we don't have a lot of overhead as far as how many Wi-Fi networks we're offering. So we're going to, as we move forward, we're going to dig into those more and say, what do they really mean by loading speed? Is it because you had 40 tabs open and then your device is conking out because it can't handle it? Versus, well, I'm sitting in a McDonald's parking lot and I'm using their Wi-Fi. So we really want to drill down into that and get to the root of what do they mean by loading speed and better Wi-Fi.
Could you also drill down into which device was having the issue too?
Absolutely.
I think that's a big issue.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, they're probably going to have different experiences depending on the device. Absolutely. And then less restrictions rounds it out. So more apps and less restrictions. But, yeah, okay. Thank you for your feedback. And of course, I love hearing from the students on that. Okay. That's our survey for staff and students. Threw in the last couple slides here just to reiterate what the purpose of a tech levy would be. And Peter spoke to it earlier about, you know, identifying the need, the health and safety. But what we've identified, and you've seen this before, is the alignment and support to the district strategic plan, our Laker Learning Plan, and what guides our work in advancing personalized, student-driven learning. Second bullet item is equitable access for instructional tech for all students and staff. Third item is facilitate a 4-year device replacement cycle. With a 10-year tech levy that is voter approved, we could implement a replacement cycle and get 3 cycles out of a 10-year period. Tech levy provides sustainable funding over 10 years to acquire and maintain infrastructure that supports technology initiatives. And Peter spoke to that earlier. It's really important to have the infrastructure in place, whether it's Wi-Fi or updated switches or, you know, edge devices, whether it's routers or firewalls and all the other things behind the curtain that no one ever sees but my team. But if that's not working, nothing else in the hands of students works or in the classroom. So it's really, really important to have that infrastructure in place and as robust as possible. And being replaced and maintained on a regular cycle, because if that fails, nothing else will work. And finally, and this does not last for any reason, and in fact, it's one of the top reasons why we would go out for a tech levy, would be provide funding to sustain and enhance school safety, security, and support a crisis management plan. Whether that's additional cameras, whether that's more server space or hard drive space for longer retention rates, and other technologies like our entrance, whether it's Raptor or the key fobs and the badges at the door, there's a lot more notification systems. There's a lot more we could be doing. We want to obviously build off of what we're currently doing and expand and enhance and improve. So, last slide, I believe, and this is again the comparison you saw last time with the tech levy referendum area district comparison. You know where we're at, and we're having conversations on. Okay, these are comparisons we've made in the past, but we want to make sure that as we move forward that we're making the types of comparisons that makes the most sense for our district and our community, so that we are comparing whether that's athletic conference versus geographical versus size of population. So we're working through that, but these are the ones that we said, these are districts that we've used in the past for comparison purposes. So here's where we're at with the current tech levy and what we have and what others are currently doing. And with that, we're at the point where I can attempt to stand in front of this podium and answer any questions that you might have.
I think we've been asking him quite a bit on the way too, but does anybody have any other questions or anything?
Are we going to talk about tech levy in general or specifically to Marcus's presentation at the moment?
I think specifically right now, is there anything to Marcus's, otherwise we can let him go.
I'll add one comment at least and see if you can affirm this was your sense. What jumped out at me is some of those open-ended comments that both students and teachers provided. And they weren't about, it's easier for me at home to do this. It was, what was one of the student ones that I just grabbed? It helps me learn because I can reread or rewatch something. I can get a lot of learning apps. The teachers are talking about the ways they can connect or their access to materials. They're talking about classroom learning. So this is not a levy that we're saying we want everyone to take your devices and go home and learn. This is talking about personalized learning at its best and helping these students become prepared to go out into the world and fulfill the mission of, lifelong learners. And so I just wanted to underscore that and to thank you and your team, because you have tirelessly come back several times with new information to us. And it's very clear that the need is real. The timing has been the issue. And there's just no denying right now the need we have and the opportunities ahead of us. So I want to thank you and your staff for being patient and continuing to remind us how important this is.
Thank you. Yes, Mary.
Oh, Enrique, did you have a question?
Not a question, a comment. If you have a question, go ahead.
We talked a lot about the variety on that slide. One thing that we did miss talking about was the tech support. And obviously with the full one-to-one and the additional apps, et cetera, there's a staffing issue. And so I was just wondering, is there an ideal staff level? I'm not trying to put you on the spot if you don't know, I get it. Right now, we are not staffed even comparatively to other school districts, whether they have a tech levy or not. So what could be expected out of this, or what would be your desire if you're willing to share?
I am willing to share. So thank you for asking the question. At our next presentation, we have an updated slide about our ratios compared to our neighbors with staffing the students. So in previous presentations, it was about a year old worth of data, and we have updated numbers for that. And I think at that time I would be really interested in hearing feedback, and I'll pitch an idea of what I think was sufficient support would look like. Currently, we have just over 9,000 devices, and I have 2 tech specialists dedicated to those devices. So something more than that, but I will definitely, as we work towards our next presentation, I will be sharing the updated numbers as far as what ratios are, and then some recommendations on what that would look like.
I appreciate how you, sorry, Mary, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you know offhand if any of those ratios, because I know this is a big thing in some of the school districts, that they actually have students go and be the support people, so they can learn it as part of, let's say, a tech study course of some kind. Is that something that is included in those numbers, or is that something that you would include, and to be honest, it may be more of a pain for you to actually manage that too, so I don't know.
It'd be a lot of fun, but with its own unique challenges, of course. The numbers that we've been generating are paid, they're full-time employees that we didn't include student groups, and we're not, we have our SWAT students at our high school and middle school, but we're not including those in those ratios or numbers. But they're fantastic work with. Every chance we get with the SWAT kiddos, it's absolute blast, and they identify things that, it's like, that's a great point. We're going to look into that. So they are really on the front line of this. So there's just such a value add of working with them. But as far as the comparison with staffing and ratios, we didn't include students.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Enrique?
Yes. Thank you for the presentation, first and foremost, and all the hard work. I can barely see over the podium.
Yeah.
So I think there's a very unique story to be told here. Just kind of looking at Peter Leatherman's presentation and this one, there's an intersection between technology and equity. And that story is told through a lot of these different comments. Being able to utilize technology to relearn, reread, and let the learning stick. Not everybody learns at the same level. Not everybody has that same capacity, and they require something more or something different, whether it's on their own time or with teacher time or para time. Technology helps facilitate that conversation for those students and those parents. And from the teacher perspective or certified staff perspective, I'm able to implement and teach all of my class as an entire unit. But then I can reach the individual needs for each one of those different students, and they have the technology to be able to do it independently or with me as that educator. So that's certainly a story that warrants telling and sharing, because equity doesn't mean equal. And we just need to make sure that we market that. That it's not a race issue, it's not anything else. Equity is not equal, and it's about meeting the needs of every single learner so that they can reach their utmost potential.
I completely agree, and thank you.
And then one additional piece that I thought of afterwards.
Yeah.
It's just thinking of the last slide, next to last slide of the technology levy showing where Prior Lake is versus, or Prior Lake Savage versus all the other school districts. And just kind of relating that back to what does that mean to the individual household or the property owner? So it was $6.5 million. What does that really mean to me? So maybe there's a way to kind of break those numbers down to household by household. If we compare ourselves to some of these other districts, what does that mean for every single household in terms of providing these additional services, providing you with the resources you need to be able to provide the tech support, to provide the break fix work, and to help us reach and help all of our learners reach their full potential.
I'll definitely work with the business office on that and see if we can, for our next presentation, break this out even further to address some of those points that you'd like us to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a good segue, both Mary's question and Enrique's, to really, take a thinking about what we have heard in the last hour and 45 minutes, both from Peter Leatherman's survey and the testing that we did, and the input we gathered from our community stakeholders with that balloon parent survey, as well as what staff and students told us now, and just have a conversation. Again, we've got a timeline and an expectation to continue bringing things forward. However, we absolutely need direction in order for Marcus to be able to answer a question about how much staffing. It depends on how much we're going to seek in terms of a technology levy. It depends on what you'll hear from Julie in a little bit about our preliminary budget for 21-22. But we need direction from the board so that we can bring forward a plan and a recommendation that can answer more of those specific questions that I know you all have. We've been planning, and seeking input, and now we're at the time, should you give us direction, that we'll have to turn that into a recommendation and a plan, but really need to know direction on an amount of money we should bring a plan forward with, because I don't want to go through exercises if ultimately we are off base with what the board is directing at this point.
Okay, so I think a couple things just to frame our conversation. So I think we need to hear from people where their comfort level is as far as going out for a tech levy at all. And if so, so yay or nay on that. And then if so, what is a, amount? Because we have to go back to staff if that's the direction we go with some type of number. We see on the chart, here to here. So I think that's where we're kind of they're looking for direction depending on where we go. So, I think I'd like to hear from everybody, that being said. So I know if you want to, the presentation on the 10th, on 5/10 had, the technology levy planning presentation, had some of those numbers in, based on our property tax levels. So that's in there as well, where they came out with 2.5, 3.5, and 4.5, and based on what the yearly amount is for the homeowner. So I mean, I'd refer you to that that chart because that's there. I know that was done. That being said, does anyone like to start us off? Go ahead, Michael.
If it's okay, I'm going to follow a string that kind of connects and goes from, and if you want to sit down,
Yes,
Marcus,
if
you
you
can.
can
You did a really good job staying in the
Thanks,
microphones.
Yeah.
Worked hard at it.
We got your back. I kind of want to follow a thread that kind of connects what Marcus has brought forward again, what the Morse Leatherman study shared with us, and hopefully connecting to the work that Julie and her team are presenting with the budget coming up. And so I see kind of three big circles that we're talking about. One is budget issues, one is perceptions in the community, and one is our very real needs in the district. And I just want to touch on those. In terms of our budget needs, I do think we are not the only district dealing with misperceptions in the community about how much money is, quote unquote, being thrown at public education right now. And so I think that for ourselves and for people who we need to share this information with, it's just really important to continue to repeat that. For example, when we had to shut down to in-person learning, we had not only ongoing expenses, we had additional. We had food to get out to students. We had new COVID protocols and PPE. We had busing that still had to take place for certain things, and the expenses kept going. We are grateful for all of the COVID relief funds that we have gotten. They are distributed differently to different districts. So what we get may be very different from what the district one direction down from us gets or one behind us. And so it has been a small percentage, to use the Morse Leatherman methodology. If you talk about percentage of budget, those relief funds have helped. They were not a huge percent of our budget. They had limited use, and they had to be spent by a certain time, and there was no long-term budget stability that came out of those, so we're grateful we had them, and it's a misperception that a lot of money got thrown at us. The other thing I want to comment is the recent budget target agreements at the state level. We do, public education in general in Minnesota has a hard time with state funding keeping up with expenses. This is an ongoing issue. And when the budget, I know we're going into special session, but when the budget target agreements were discussed recently, it was a little misleading because if you look at, and I brought the printout with me of all the different departments, it looks like E12 education is just like swimming in money right now. But it's unfair to compare us who is one of the top 3, pieces of pie in the state budget. I think we're 40% of the state's budget. So to look at those numbers percentage-wise compared to something like transportation or energy and commerce, it makes it look like we were the big winners. But then if you break down the budget target scenarios based on the amount they agreed on for E12 education, I know we're not on camera, but I have this list here broken down of all the different, high-end needs that public education had. And we're only going to be able to get, 1 or 2 of those needs met with the budget's targets that were agreed upon. They don't know yet how those categories will shake out. But while they play it as a win for public education, if you look at budget numbers and percentages, we're still struggling, and we will be struggling with that. So I think budget-wise, Mary, you may have been the one who mentioned this earlier, but, our general fund is funding so much, including unfunded mandates. And everything we do for technology, we have to pull out of that general fund, which means we are cutting funds from other things, programs, staffing, et cetera, that we could be using that money for. So one thing we have to think about is how long can we continue to maintain the technology out of that general fund? And we've already been facing big budget cuts, and we're going to be facing future cuts if we have to keep draining the general fund. So in terms of public perception, I think it's important that what seems like a win for the, in the newspapers, relatively speaking, we're still struggling with that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that I went and listened to some of our older board meetings and study sessions when we've been talking about this. And one of the biggest ones was last August. And I know we have 2 new board members who aren't there, so I'm just going to summarize. Lee was chair at the time, and we took a very serious look at going out for a tech levy at that time. And I think 6 out of the 7 of us were in favor of a tech levy. And a majority of us expressed concern about the timing, because with the impact of COVID, not only were our staff stressed to the point of just working around the clock, and I know Dr. Stalo said, if you tell us to do it, we're going to do it. If you give us board direction, we won't say it's too much. But that and our families, some who were facing financial burdens or losing jobs or illness, that and the fact that we also would not be honoring our commitment to a good level of stakeholder input to turn it around that quickly. So it wasn't that we didn't need one, it was that we tabled it. But there was so much good discussion in that meeting for anyone who wants to go back and listen to that August 3rd one. Mary, you made several good points I just want to highlight. You talked about achievement gap and asked questions about that with technology, and that your experience that you could speak to with the people you mentor and how the technology devices were working. That we were looking at ways to enable teachers to do more regardless of the learning environment, not because we want them teaching kids at home, because we want them to enable students and themselves to do more. That we have to really talk about the sustainability of our technology, because the more obsolete devices we have are the ones where the system updates can no longer happen. That becomes very expensive to us. So there's a certain expense that comes with living with the devices you have, that becomes an issue. And then just our overall fiscal responsibility to the district. We have to look at where we're headed down the road in terms of our general funding, or our general fund, and what we can continue to support. And this is just one lever we can use to create some stability in our district by asking our taxpayers to help us support this. So in terms of long-term stability and budgeting, I think it's really important that we have this serious discussion about this tonight, and that if we do go forward, depending on the direction that is agreed upon tonight or the amount, we have some really important messaging then about those things to go forward. So to share, to help correct perceptions. So thank you for letting me connect all those at one time. I'll step back.
Mary, do you want to speak?
I don't necessarily agree with all the all the recollections of the August 3rd meeting, but I do appreciate you bringing up some of the points about education gap, equity, and also basically at that time, and we have been in this mode for a long time, that there's a lot of parents out there who have been providing their own equipment for their students, whether or not it showed up on the survey or not, simply because the iPads have been, great for a reference point, but not a great learning tool from a day-to-day learning perspective. And my personal opinion is we should have gone out for a tech levy a long time ago, and although I appreciate the tax sensitivity, we do have a fairly educated population here. And a population that has felt deeply before this, in my opinion, as well as at the onset of the pandemic, that they would have sacrificed $10, $20, $30 a month rather than going off and buying their students a $1,200 MacBook or Windows device to make sure that their kids, had something, particularly when the households with working parents had to suffer the Wi-Fi issues as well as the shared technology issues during the day, which was distressing, and obviously most people are fatigued. So I think that we're in a good position, but I do feel that if we do this, then people are going to want to see the impact themselves. They're not going to want to have it buried in, oh, we updated a switch, that sort of thing, or we updated this. And I think we're going to have to show that fairly directly, and we have to be prepared to adjust our objectives and our scope going forward to say how, if we invest this money, what will we be doing with it? How will it actually promote and improve overall educational outcomes? And, quite frankly, I don't think that's a stretch to be able to put in anything, simply because access to a device that enables learning, as Enrique pointed out, is life-changing for some students and their learning capabilities. So I think that we're in a win-win situation going forward. Now, the public's perception, and I think this is something that we need to come to grips with, we can't keep just telling people, okay, we got this money, but don't use it. Maybe if we were a little bit more pragmatic on our website and said, hey, this is where the COVID money actually went to, and broke it down so they understood how much it cost to put the plastic dividers on everybody's desk, how much it costs to pay for the masks, how much it costs to replace our air filters 10 times longer, 10 times more than we ever had to, how many times we had to re-clean the floors and pay for that. And then there's other things that, of course, the money went to. But yeah, I mean, if you listen to the legislative sessions, they're going to talk about the fact that the USDA paid for most of the food program, right? They're going to talk about how the money should have gone to online learning software and stuff like that. And quite frankly, if you look at the cost of taking a textbook and putting it online, most of the licenses we had already did that. It was all the other surround criteria that cost. And so it wasn't money that was put in the bank and interest on it. It was money that was literally spent on those items. And so we need to be forthright about that and educate the public. And I think we do have a public that wants to be educated. And we have to be careful of just not giving talking points and graphs and stuff like that, and actually give them the details so we can help the argument. And also, it will also help the feedback that we get. Because once they start seeing the distribution and the spend and exactly what it's going to, I think we have a tremendously, a group of a population of parents here that want to get involved, that want to have influence and want to make a positive impact. And we can use that to our advantage during this process. We're here to educate, so let's educate the public about what is really going on with the numbers, how it was spent, what our situation is, And it's not going to be unique to, we're not going to have a unique situation in other school districts. So with all that in mind, the other thing that I wanted to make a comment of what did get brought up in one of a couple of sessions at the legislature is that they're concerned overall about our state's growth and our state's ability to attract businesses, et cetera. Well, that comes down to the local level. If we continue to improve our school district and give our kids the ultimate in an educational experience, we're going to attract more businesses here. We're going to attract more people to this area. We're going to help the state overall. And I think a lot of school districts are taking that viewpoint also. And by the way, you can't do anything in business without knowing how to learn or how to work with a computer. And it's not about learning the guts of the computer. It's about learning how to use technology in order to promote whatever it is your job you're trying to do. This is a direct impact to that. Nobody in a work environment uses just an iPad with no keyboard. Let's just face it, it doesn't happen. So we have a lot of selling points here that aren't hard to do. One thing I was absolutely in disagreement with in last August is I didn't think this would be a hard sell at all with educating the public. I don't think this is going to be the amount of work that's involved in let's say a construction referendum, because this is something that as long as we define the terms and consistently define the terms, I don't think there's too many people that aren't going to get it.